He was just a nobody, until her kindness uncovered the hidden air testing what it truly means to be human. He had always lived in the shadows, not because he wanted to, but because the world rarely noticed him. His life was a quiet collection of overlooked moments, the kind that dissolve into the background noise of everyday bustle. A barista who barely remembered his order, a stranger's glance that flickered away before recognition could settle. He was a nobody, the kind of person people passed without a second thought. On this particular afternoon, the city wore its usual gray cloak. Rain fell in soft sheets, blurring the edges of the streets and turning sidewalks slick with the scent of wet earth. He ducked under the awning of a small cafe, grateful for the brief shelter, his clothes damp, his heart even more so. He watched as the world hurried by, umbrellas bobbing like colorful flowers in a drab garden, footsteps splashing through puddles without care. Then she appeared. She moved through the rain with a quiet confidence that made the drizzle seem like a delicate veil rather than a nuisance. She was in her early 40s, with the kind of graceful poise that spoke of life lived fully but without pretension. Her eyes, a deep, warm brown, held a softness that drew him in without effort. There was something different about her, something kind. When their eyes met, it was brief, almost accidental. But she smiled, not a quick, polite curve of lips, but a genuine, slow bloom of kindness that reached her eyes and softened her entire face. She didn't hesitate. Without a word, she reached into her bag and pulled out an extra umbrella. Her fingers brushed his hand for a moment as she offered it to him, the touch light but steady, like a quiet lifeline. He took it, surprised by the warmth that spread through his chest, a stark contrast to the damp chill on his skin. The fabric was cool under his fingers, but her kindness felt like a spark against the cold. The rain continued to fall, but now they walked side by side, sharing this small shelter. The city's noise softened around them, the drip of water from the awning, the muted footsteps on wet pavement, the faint rustle of her coat. As they moved, he noticed how her presence calmed the usual storm of self-doubt that shadowed his every step. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was gentle, the kind of sound that makes you lean in closer, hoping to catch every word. They talked briefly about the weather, but it was more than that. Her gaze lingered, curious but unjudging, and for the first time in a long while, he felt seen. That moment was a quiet promise, a fragile beginning that neither of them fully understood yet. His heart beat a little faster, not from the rain or the chill, but from the unexpected warmth of a stranger's kindness. And beneath that warmth, a tentative hope blossomed, that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't quite as invisible as he thought. In the days that followed their chance encounter, the woman's kindness became a quiet thread weaving through his otherwise unnoticed existence. He found himself scanning familiar streets, half hoping, half afraid, that he might catch a glimpse of her again. It was absurd, really. After all, she was a woman whose life seemed worlds apart from his own, yet her presence had planted something fragile but persistent inside him, the feeling of being seen. Their next meeting was unexpected, almost casual. He was seated on a worn park bench, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the rustling leaves above. He watched children playing nearby, their laughter light and unburdened, and wondered how long it had been since he'd felt that carefree. Then she appeared, walking with the same quiet grace that had drawn him before. She noticed him immediately. Her smile was softer this time, warmer, as if recognizing a familiar part of herself in the quiet figure hunched on the bench. Without hesitation, she sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The air between them felt charged yet calm, a delicate balance of comfort and something unnamed. Their conversation was slow and easy, like the gentle unfolding of a flower. She asked about his favorite books, and he found himself sharing stories he rarely told anyone. Her eyes, wide and attentive, held his gaze without impatience or judgment. Every word from her felt like a balm, soothing the layers of invisibility he had wrapped himself in for so long. There were moments when their hands brushed, fleeting contact that sent a quiet warmth spiraling through him. One afternoon, as she guided him through a crowded market, her hand settled briefly on his shoulder. The touch was firm but gentle, grounding him amid the noise and chaos. He felt the steady pulse beneath her skin, a steady reminder that she was there, real and present. He noticed the subtle details about her that made his chest tighten with unspoken longing, the way her hair caught the light in soft waves, the faint scent of jasmine that seemed to cling to her, the way her laughter lifted her whole face in a quiet, unrestrained joy. He was drawn to the way her gaze softened when she looked at him, not with pity, but with genuine curiosity and something like hope. Yet beneath this growing closeness, a fragile tension lingered. He hesitated to fully let her in, afraid that revealing too much might shatter the delicate bond they had formed. The age gap between them was a silent presence, a subtle undercurrent neither spoke of but both felt. He wondered if she saw him as a curiosity or a mere distraction from the complexities of her own life. Still, her kindness persisted, steady and unwavering. It became the quiet rhythm of his days, a promise that even in a world that often overlooked him, there was someone who chose to see, there was a life he kept locked away, hidden beneath the surface of the quiet existence he showed the world. Behind the worn clothes and the careful humility was a secret, a name that carried weight, a family that moved in circles he had never wanted to enter. He was an heir, yes, but not just any heir. A man testing humanity by stepping outside the gilded cage he had been born into. Yet this truth was a double-edged sword. It was the reason he kept his distance, the reason he walked carefully around the woman whose kindness was slowly unraveling his walls. How could she understand the burden he carried? How could she know that the life she was slowly drawing him out of was one built on expectations, privilege, and suffocating appearances? On nights when the city's lights blurred through rain-speckled windows, he would sit alone in his modest apartment, fingers tracing the faint engraving on a delicate ring, the family crest that was both a promise and a prison. The cool metal against his skin was a stark reminder of the life he had chosen to leave behind, even if just for now. He thought about her often, her laughter, her quiet confidence, the way her eyes seemed to see through the layers he wore like armor. And yet, the secret gnawed at him. What if the truth shattered the fragile hope growing between them? What if kindness turned to regret when she learned who he really was? In his quieter moments, he felt the weight of two worlds pressing down. One was the familiar comfort of simplicity, where smiles were genuine and touches were unguarded. The other was the gilded loneliness of privilege, where every gesture was calculated, and every relationship measured. When they met again, he felt the tension coil tighter beneath his skin. He wanted to tell her everything, to reveal the man behind the humble facade, but the fear held him back. Instead, he watched her from across the room, noting the gentle curve of her smile, the way her fingers absent-mindedly brushed her hair behind her ear. His heart ached at the thought of deceiving her, even if it was only by omission. He longed to reach out, to feel her hand in his and confess that the kindness she had shown nobody was perhaps the only truth in a world of pretense. The internal conflict twisted within him. To stay hidden meant protecting her from a life she might never want, but to reveal himself meant risking everything, the fragile trust, the quiet connection, the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find something real. In the silence between them, unspoken words hung heavy, and every glance was laden with the question neither dared ask. Would she accept him, the heir and the nobody, if she knew the full story? As rain began to tap softly on the windowpane, he closed his eyes, steadying his breath. He decided then that if kindness had saved him once, perhaps it could save him again, but only if he dared to be brave enough to let her in. The quiet room held a softness that neither of them dared to break. It wasn't grand or lavish, just a small space filled with the faint scent of warm tea and the muted glow of a single lamp casting gentle shadows on the walls. Outside, the world moved in hurried chaos, but here, time seemed to slow, folding around them like a tender secret. He sat across from her, nerves tangled beneath his calm exterior. For so long, he had kept his true self locked away, wrapped in layers of silence and self-protection. Yet tonight, something in her steady gaze gave him courage. It was an unspoken invitation to lower his defenses, to share the loneliness that had shaped him. His fingers brushed nervously against the edge of the table before he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I've always been invisible, you know. Not by choice, but because. I guess I never felt like I belonged anywhere. She listened, her eyes never leaving his, warm and patient. When he faltered, her hand reached across, lightly brushing his cheek. The touch was soft, electric, a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of comfort and acceptance. His breath caught, the steady beat of her pulse somehow grounding him more than he expected. I come from a world that expects me to play a part, he confessed, his voice trembling slightly. A world where everything is calculated, and emotions are just, something to manage carefully. He paused, searching her face for any hint of judgment, but found only kindness. Her fingers lingered against his skin, and she spoke gently, "You don't have to pretend with me. I see you, the real you." That moment cracked open the walls he had built. He shared pieces of himself he had never spoken aloud, the pressure of family legacy, the loneliness beneath the polished surface, the fear that his true self would never be enough. His words wove between them like fragile threads, binding their shared understanding. She reached out again, this time her hand settling lightly over his. The warmth of her palm seeped into his skin, quiet reassurance that he wasn't alone anymore. He leaned into the touch, feeling the tension in his chest begin to ease. The room felt smaller, more intimate, as if the space between them had dissolved. Their breaths mingled softly, the sound of a clock ticking in the background marking time in gentle beats. The scent of her jasmine perfume wrapped around him, soothing and familiar. He looked into her eyes and saw reflected there not pity, but a quiet strength, a willingness to accept all the messy, beautiful parts of him. His own eyes brimmed with a mix of relief and vulnerability, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the fragile hope of belonging. She smiled, a slow, genuine curve that touched her lips and reached her eyes. "You're not invisible to me," she whispered. "You never were." And in that moment, with her hand still cradling his cheek, the space between them disappeared completely, leaving only the warmth of two hearts beginning to trust. The delicate world they had begun to build together suddenly felt fragile beneath the weight of whispered doubts and sideways glances. News traveled fast, faster than either of them had expected, and the secret he had guarded so carefully slipped through cracks in the polished walls of his hidden life. Friends and family, those towering figures of expectation and tradition, voiced their concerns quietly at first, then more insistently. Their questions were sharp and laden with unspoken judgments. Could she truly understand the complicated legacy he carried? Was she just a fleeting kindness, a brief distraction from a world he was destined to rejoin? She felt the pressure too. In the quiet moments between their meetings, she wrestled with her own fears, afraid that she might be seen not as a partner, but as an outsider, someone who belonged to a different chapter in his life story. The age gap, once just a subtle undercurrent, now felt like a visible line drawn in the sand, separating their worlds in a way she hadn't fully allowed herself to see before. One evening, they met beneath the soft glow of street lamps on a nearly empty sidewalk. The city's hum was distant, the night air cool and crisp. Their footsteps echoed softly, but between them, an invisible tension crackled, thick and heavy. She wanted to reach for his hand but hesitated, the unspoken worries settling between them like shadows. He noticed, the ache of uncertainty tightening his chest. The warmth of her presence was a comfort, but it was also a reminder of all that threatened to pull them apart. His voice was low when he finally spoke, raw with the frustration he had held inside. "They don't see us," he said, "not really. To them, this is just a chapter that doesn't belong." She swallowed hard, her fingers curling into the pocket of her coat as if seeking strength. "Maybe they're right," she whispered, "maybe we don't belong. But that doesn't mean it's not real, for me." Their eyes met, searching for answers in the dim light. The cold breeze tugged at their coats, but neither moved closer, the gap between them filled with all the doubts and fears neither wanted to voice aloud. Still, beneath the tension, there was a quiet resilience. His hand finally found hers, tentative but determined, fingers intertwining with a fragile promise. The simple touch grounded them amid the swirling storm of outside opinions. In that moment, the world felt vast and unyielding, but also strangely intimate, a space where two hearts, against all odds, fought to be heard. Her head tilted slightly, resting almost imperceptibly against his shoulder. The softness of her breath was a small warmth against the chill of the night. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in the quiet struggle of choosing each other, despite everything that threatened to pull them apart. Their love was no longer just about kindness or hidden truths. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the cafe's tall windows, casting warm golden hues over the worn wooden tables and the gentle clink of porcelain cups. It was the same place where their story had quietly begun, simple, unassuming, but now heavy with the weight of everything they had been through. They sat across from each other in a quiet corner, the noise of the city outside softened into a gentle hum. The tension that had built between them these past days was still there, but beneath it was something new, a fragile hope, ready to be nurtured. She reached across the table first, her fingers brushing lightly over his, a gentle anchor in the shifting tides of their emotions. His breath caught at the warmth of her touch, the softness of her skin a quiet reassurance. The scent of her jasmine perfume lingered, wrapping around him like a tender embrace. "I've been scared," he admitted, voice low and steady. "Scared that you might see me differently now, like I'm just some story, some test or experiment. But you never treated me like that." His eyes searched hers, raw and vulnerable. She smiled softly, her gaze steady and full of understanding. "Kindness isn't charity," she said gently. "It's seeing someone's soul, not their status or their story. I don't care about the name behind the mask. I care about you." The words settled between them like a warm blanket, wrapping away the cold doubts. He squeezed her hand lightly, the simple contact speaking volumes. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where the lines of their different worlds blurred, where their love was defined not by expectations, but by the moments they shared. They talked then, really talked, about fears and hopes, about the quiet loneliness they each carried and the unexpected light they had found in each other. His voice grew stronger with every word, his walls crumbling as she listened without judgment, her presence steady and unwavering. She leaned in, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, her fingertips lingering just long enough to send a spark through him. The soft pressure of her hand was a promise, that she was here, fully and completely, choosing him every step of the way. Outside, the world carried on, unaware of the delicate reconciliation unfolding within these four walls. The clatter of cups and murmurs of other patrons created a soothing backdrop, a reminder that life continued beyond their bubble, but that for now, they were exactly where they needed to be. He smiled then, a genuine, open smile that reached his eyes and softened his features. "I'm tired of hiding," he said quietly. "With you, I don't have to pretend." Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears, the corners crinkling with a mix of joy and relief. "Then don't," she whispered. "We'll face whatever comes together." They sat there a while longer, hands entwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony. The slow burn of their love had finally found its flame, a warm, steady light promising hope and belonging. The golden hour spilled across the city like a quiet blessing, painting the streets in hues of amber and rose. They walked side by side along the empty sidewalk, the world around them fading into a gentle blur. The warmth of the late afternoon sun kissed their skin, softening the edges of their worries and fears. Her hand found his, fingers slipping gently into his with a familiarity that spoke of trust earned and promises kept. The small gesture was electric yet tender, an unspoken vow that whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them together. He felt the steady rhythm of her pulse beneath his palm, a steady beat that steadied his own. The years between them, once a silent barrier, now felt like a bridge, built from shared moments, honest words, and the quiet courage to be vulnerable. As they walked, her head tilted to rest lightly against his shoulder. He welcomed the softness, the way her breath mingled with his, the subtle warmth that spread through his chest. It was a simple closeness, but it carried the weight of everything they had been through, the secret fears, the whispered confessions, the moments of doubt and resilience. The world had tested them, set its boundaries and whispered doubts, but here, in this fragile sanctuary, those voices faded. The glow of the sun caught the gentle smile that curved her lips, the spark of light in her eyes reflecting his own. He tightened his grip slightly, a silent promise that he was here, fully present. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, uncertainty felt less daunting, because they walked it hand in hand. In the quiet, he remembered the small moments that had brought them here, the shared umbrella on a rainy day, the brief touches that lingered longer than expected, the honest talks that peeled away layers of pretense. Each memory was a thread woven into the fabric of their story, delicate yet unbreakable. She looked up at him then, her gaze steady and full of something that made his heart catch, a mixture of gratitude, affection, and quiet determination. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "I want us to keep choosing each other." He smiled, feeling the warmth spread through his chest like sunlight. "Always," he replied, his voice firm with conviction. The city around them was alive with possibility, but here, in this moment, it was just the two of them. The slow-burn romance that had started with a simple act of kindness had blossomed into something real, something that neither time nor circumstance could erase. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched behind them, they continued walking, together, against the world, ready to write the next chapter of their story, side by side.